It's that time of year again, and eclipse season is coming up. We have a lunar eclipse on March 25th, and that occurs at 5 degrees of Libra, and that will prepare us emotionally for a total solar eclipse on April 8th, where I think between 8 and 12 states in the United States will get to see the total solar eclipse, which is really cool. And including my house where I'm at here in Ohio. So I've already started praying for sunshine for that day, but the eclipse does occur in the afternoon. Now, eclipses run in cycles, so we usually have 2 pairs of eclipses a year, sometimes 3. Occasionally they don't occur in pairs. Sometimes we can have 3 eclipses in one season, and Saros cycles are they're like repeating eclipses, and a new cycle will begin when an eclipse occurs near the North or South Pole, and then those eclipses repeat, and they get closer and closer to the equator, and then they move to the other pole. So if you've ever heard anyone talk about Saros cycles, that's what they're talking about. We will have a video on Patreon describing that in a little bit more detail. But if you know about it, I think this is Saros cycle 139. And it's important to know because, I mean, and these cycles can last like hundreds of years. I think this one began in the year 1500, and we're getting close to the middle. We're not quite there. I think in 50 or 100 years we'll be in the middle, but as the eclipses get close to the middle of the Saros cycle, they become more powerful, and the one that's in the exact middle, close to the equator, tend to be really powerful. And this is a total eclipse, so that's the April 8th. I just wanted to mention that. If you never heard anything about that before, don't worry about it. We'll have a video explaining those more. And then every eclipse within that cycle tends to carry a similar theme, but that's a video for another day. I just noticed I have a lot of stones on today. I've been wearing these 2, and then I thought I need to focus, so I need my Mercury on Howlite, which is a favorite of mine for when I work. And then I started feeling sleepy, so I popped on a Mars and Red Tiger's Eye, and then before I know it, I feel this pull in the back of my neck. They're getting heavy. I love my stones. So, but let's start with this lunar eclipse that will begin that is on March 25th. We're going to see the early developments of eclipse season as soon as, I think it's March 10th or 11th. We have a new moon. So I'm going to go to that chart. So it's on March 10th. We have a new moon in Pisces. And so that's the beginning of a lunar cycle. That is not an eclipse, but that is the beginning of a lunar cycle. And as we go along in the cycle towards the full moon associated with it on March 25th is a lunar eclipse. So we could see eclipse developments as early as March 10th. And it's important to note on March 10th, that's not a time where you want to have a new beginning. When I start something new, I like to do it around new moons, but I'm not going to do it with this one. I'm not going to set intentions or try to do any manifesting, because this is wrapped up in eclipse cycle. And during eclipse season, we are shown by spirit where our focus needs to be. Because if you set intentions and you try to get something going, it's highly likely that there's going to be something else that pulls your attention away. And so we don't want to be wasting time and energy. So at this new moon, around 20 degrees of Pisces on March 10th, it occurs about a halfway point between Saturn and Neptune. We have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction between the year 2025 and 2026. So we could see some early developments that will be associated with that conjunction. And it's going to have more of a Neptunian feel because they're all in Pisces. But it is a time where we could have the ability to take an ideal or a creative idea or a spiritual experience, realization about a spiritual experience, and bring that into form and apply it to our daily life. So I think that's where we want to keep our focus around that time in March, and keep our eyes open to any developments concerning ideals, creativity, or spirituality, or even sacrifice to better someone else's life. And then on March 25th, the sun will have moved forward from Pisces to Aries, and the moon will be at 5 degrees of Libra. So we have the eclipse at 5 degrees of Libra, and whatever realizations that we had around the new moon, around this eclipse on March 25th, we'll see how we feel about it, but this energy becomes a little more dynamic where we can start taking action. And that's because the sun and moon will be in Aries and Libra in cardinal signs. And cardinal signs are more dynamic than the water sign of Pisces. A lunar eclipse tends to bring up or bring our attention to the inner world, to our emotions, spirituality. And being in Libra, we'll want to ask ourselves, do I feel peace on the inside? Do I have harmony in my relationships? Am I emotionally satisfied at work? Do I have a good work personal life balance? Those are the things that we're going to want to look at and seriously consider, because when we have this solar eclipse on April 8th in Aries, it will be more difficult to get in touch with the inner world, because Aries is strong energy, independence, taking action, courage. And so our focus will be on using that energy constructively and taking action in the real world. So it is really important to use the lunar eclipse as a prep. I think the new moon in Pisces will draw our attention to the inner world. And then by the time we get to the full moon on March 25th, we'll be able to better see if we have balance. Now that's if we're maintaining awareness from day to day. And if we take the time to be in touch with ourselves, take the time to meditate, to go for a quiet walk by yourself, to do a little bit of journaling. Your progress at this time is dependent upon your effort. Do you work with it, or are you running from it? If you do take the time to do these things in the emotional prep that comes up beforehand, then by the time eclipse season comes along, or by the time that solar eclipse comes along in April, you'll feel grounded and better prepared to handle what comes along. Because Aries, the sign Aries can cause a lot of discord, because it's focused on ego and the differences between people, and everyone's trying to get what they want. But Libra can really smooth things over. So the fact that the Libra lunar eclipse happens first, it's kind of like you want to embrace that energy. So if any discord or confrontations happen around the solar eclipse in April, you'll be in a better emotional place to be able to handle that. You will want to look in your own natal astrology chart. Do you have any planets between 0 and 10 degrees of Libra? And this will be the strongest for the lunar eclipse. Then I would say, secondly, do you have any planets between 0 and 10 degrees of Aries? And then I would look at Capricorn and Cancer. Do you have any planets or placements, like the rising sign, in that area? And after that, if the answer is yes, you'll want to focus on developing those planets. So if it's Venus, then your focus might be on relationships, money, your values, just as an example. And then after that, you'll want to see what house that falls in your natal astrology chart. So, if it's the 4th house, that would affect home and family. If it's the 2nd house, it's money and values. Now, this Libra moon, at 5 degrees of Libra for the lunar eclipse, is trine to Pluto at 1 degrees of Aquarius. This is going to be, it's very empowering. So it's emotionally empowering. You can have very deep insights into yourself, your own inner workings, and even in your relationships, because a lunar eclipse and full moons tend to bring our focus to relationships and our relationship to other people, but also how we relate to our environment and circumstances and things going on around us. There is a tremendous potential for growth here, emotionally and spiritually, and for self-improvement. A lot of developments can occur again in the houses that this falls in. So look what house is it, 5 degrees of Libra, and then the opposite house that contains 5 degrees of Aries. This is going to affect both of those houses. And so you could see significant developments in those areas. Now, I don't associate a lot of events that occur around a lunar eclipse, maybe or maybe not. I think the solar eclipses tend to be more dynamic, and that's when we tend to see the bigger events. But sometimes there can be events that occur around the lunar eclipse. But even if something occurs around you in your environment, pretty quickly you're going to want to go within and say, okay, how does this affect me? How do I feel? Because this is definitely going to concern the emotions. And an important thing to remember, if something does happen, if someone around you changes, or there's a circumstance or situation that changes at work or in your community, try not to fight it. Try not to work against what's happening. If you feel like you need to take action, or if something's wrong, and then take quite a bit of time, meditate on that, do some research, and see how you feel a couple of weeks after. If you have to do something in the moment, then you have to, but I would recommend waiting, because this involves Pluto, and we cannot, a lot of times when Pluto's involved, we don't have as much control over the situation that we would like to have. And the more you trying to gain control over things, the more you suffer. And so acceptance is really important. So you'll need to ask yourself, with events around that time, can I learn to live with this? Is this acceptable? And what can you do and what can you do? Now, you can control yourself, your own decisions for your life, but you can't control people, places, and things. We can't make other people do what we want them to do or what we think is right. We can't make the company change, but you do have control over yourself and how you respond to it. And that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind for the last 2 weeks of March. Now, remember, you can start to see developments as early as March 10th, but we will see things come to a head March 25th. There's healing involved here too, because we have eclipses when we have a new moon or a full moon within, I think it's 17 degrees of the lunar nodes. So the nodes are those points in the chart that look like horseshoes. Those are the nodes of the moon. They're just calculations that we've done. It's where the path, if you're standing on the earth looking up at the sky, it's where the path of the sun around the earth crosses the path of the moon. And they're not on the same plane, so they always cross at 2 points, and it changes over time. And so when we have a new moon or a full moon near those nodes, we have eclipse season. And even though this lunar eclipse isn't closely aspecting Chiron, the solar eclipse will be exact conjunct Chiron down to the minute. So let's take a look at that chart, because that the sun, for the lunar eclipse, the sun and Chiron will still be in the same sign. And so I think that there is a chance for healing here, especially spiritual healing, because the new moon on March 10th is in the sign of Pisces with Neptune. That could be spiritual healing. I hope I'm not jumping around too much between these dates. But when we get to the solar eclipse on April 8th, that will be exact conjunct Chiron. So any opportunity for healing on any plane of existence, our physical bodies, the mental plane, our emotions, or spiritual, we could see doors open here for healing. And so, start looking into different ways. Start right now. Is there something you're really wanting to heal? How can you do that? Do you need to go see a doctor? Do you need to see an herbalist? Have you always wanted to try acupuncture? Do you need to see a mental health professional? Would you like to dig into your natal astrology chart? Would you like to work with a spiritual teacher? Would you like to increase your intuition, to increase your connection to spirit for spiritual healing? Think about these things now and how you can go about them. And I already have some things in mind, some things that I've been working on for quite a while, and I'm not seeing the progress that I wanted to see. Actually, I'm in more physical pain now. I've had some trouble with my feet because of a birth defect as I've gotten older. I've had more pain with walking. I got specially made inserts to help, and I ended up with tendonitis, and now I got a cane. It's a beautiful purple, which is, like, for some reason, it's my new favorite color, but just to kind of keep the weight off the one foot that's bad, and hopefully it'll heal faster. But we keep trying. I haven't given up yet, but I am looking forward to this eclipse season, that maybe the blocks that I've been experiencing recently and the increase in pain, maybe we can, maybe a door will open here. But I think that the pain that we'll be dealing with is probably something that's been around for quite a while. For me and for you, is there something in your life that's been going on for quite a while? Is there an old wound that needs to be healed? This solar eclipse on April 8th, exact conjunct Chiron, down not just the degree, but down to the minute. The sun, the moon, and Chiron all at 19 degrees of Aries, 24 minutes. That is rare. And this is a total solar eclipse. We're getting close to the halfway point in the Saros cycle. That is extremely powerful. Chiron is the big player here. Chiron is the archetype that we'll be dealing with. Chiron in mythology was a centaur. I have a video about this on Patreon for the Learn Astrology tier. And Chiron was a centaur, but not just any centaur. All centaurs had 4 horse legs and a human torso and human head, but Chiron had 2 horse legs in the back and 2 human legs in the front. He didn't fit in with the mortals, the humans. He didn't fit in with the animal kingdom. He was an outcast. He was rejected by his mother, and so he spent his life hanging out with the misfits, with the other people who were rejected by family or by society. And he ended up with a wound that couldn't be healed. He got into, I think the centaurs really got into it with Hercules, and so there was a big fight, and Chiron was wounded, but it was a fatal wound, but Chiron was half immortal, so he couldn't die. I think he was hit in the leg, and he's in perpetual pain for eternity. But to distract him from the pain, he spends his time healing others. And I'm sure there's a part of him that, in perfecting his craft, he's hoping he can heal himself. I don't think that's written in any of this mythology that I know of, but I wouldn't be surprised. But while he's working with other people and trying to heal them and working with soldiers who've been wounded on the battlefield and even being a mentor to other healers, when he's doing that, he doesn't notice his own pain. Keep that in mind as we go into eclipse season and what that could mean for you, especially if you work in any area of healing, whether it's a doctor, nurse, therapist, or if it's a pastor or spiritual healer. Even if it's not your work, some people are just natural healers. You know, some people do really well with energy work and work with their hands. Some people help heal others with their art. So we really need to expand this definition, and it's not always necessarily like a healing job. You know, we could expand this to all light workers, bringing light and love into this world. Now, there will be a lot of us in the United States that will be able to see this or see this total solar eclipse and go into darkness. I've seen a solar eclipse before in Tennessee. I think that was back in 2017, and it didn't quite get as dark as I thought it would, but it still got pretty dark. And let's look at the map now. I showed this in my my forecast for 2024 that I released last December. Look at all these states that will be affected. So it starts up in Maine through parts of New York, northeastern Pennsylvania, the northern 2/3 of Ohio, through southern Indiana. I thought it would go through Kentucky and Tennessee, but it's just the very far western edge there of Kentucky. Missouri, Arkansas, and Texas. So these are the states that will be in the total. Now, if you don't live in any of these areas, you'll be able to see a partial solar eclipse way out into, you know, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and maybe as far as Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa. So, and if you are within driving distance, you can take the day off and kind of take a day trip and drive to see the total. I would highly recommend it. It was, I did that in 2017, and I don't regret a minute of it. It was absolutely amazing. And this will last, this total solar eclipse will last almost 4 minutes in certain areas, including Ohio, where I'm at. And that doesn't sound like a long time, but it really is for an eclipse. And it was very much worth it. Back in 2017 was when I met Joe, and we had been dating a couple of months, and I was like, you want to go to Tennessee with me? And we had a great time. I have a old video of that somewhere, so with his permission, I'll put it on Patreon, because I was taking the video, so I don't even think I'm in it. He's in it, and you can see where it's getting dark. And when it got dark, it was interesting because all the like cicadas and crickets got really loud. I didn't notice that they get louder at sunset, but when it started getting dark, they started getting louder. So it was neat to see how nature reacts to an eclipse. Now, with the solar eclipse in Aries, in addition to the Chiron themes of the wounded healer, this will inspire us to take action, to take the initiative on something. This is very dynamic fire energy. So there's lots of drive here. And Aries is the sign of the pioneer and venturing into new territory and adventure. So we could see this on the personal level, but we could also see developments here on the societal level, as far as, exploration, or maybe even see a development as far as space exploration, because now we have Pluto's gone into the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius rules over the air. And so we are getting into this time where we are going to, as far as space travel and exploration, we're going to see developments at a faster pace. So we could see something like that around April. And Aries is also the sign of war and conflict. We could, on the personal level, it could be battling egos, but unfortunately, we could see developments there as far as war and conflict on the societal and political front. The eclipse doesn't make a whole lot of aspects to any other planets. It's really just making contact with the asteroids. So, of course, we have the conjunction with Chiron, and we also have a square to Ceres. And Ceres was the goddess of the harvest. So we could see some struggle there with bringing a project to fruition, trying to reap the rewards from our hard work and struggle for gains. So this is like the struggle for gains. And Ceres can also represent letting go. That is part of her mythology, especially when it comes to having children or grandchildren and letting them have their own experiences and deciding, okay, when do I step in and when do I let them make their own life choices? And that decision isn't always easy, but it might be one that you're faced with around April. And we also see, I think sometimes I mispronounce this, but it's an angle called a sesquiquadrate. Sesquiquadrate. I think it's a 135-degree angle. It's a tension aspect similar to a square, and it's making that to the asteroid Pallas. And Pallas rules over our needs for our relationship needs as far as intimacy, because Venus rules over all relating, whether it's socially or a partner. But Pallas is more partner, marriage partner, our needs for intimacy and deep bonding. And so that could come up. Aries is what do you want? Aries is also passion, and Pallas represents intimacy. So you could have your focus pulled in that direction, especially if there was a Chiron wound that affected you and how you relate to other people and how you relate in a partnership, in a romantic partnership. Now, the solar eclipse is not making direct contact to Mars and Saturn, but I am noticing in this chart two different things. We have Mars-Saturn conjunction over here in Pisces, and then we have Neptune and Venus very close. Now, Venus has moved past a conjunction with Neptune, but Mars hasn't exact conjunct Saturn yet. And so a Mars-Saturn conjunction can be, on the one hand, it can be very good for focus and concentration. And here being in Pisces, really focusing on spiritual development or your ideals, or being able to be there for another person, kind of sacrifice your own wants and needs for someone else. But it can also be very frustrating. This will allow you to focus on one thing at a time, but if you have 4 or 5 things that you need to do, it can be very frustrating and it can feel like stop, go, stop, go. So right around the time of this eclipse, just be careful of that. And if you're having frustrations, you might need to slow down and focus on one priority at a time and be flexible, because Mars Saturn will be in the sign of Pisces. That's a mutable sign that requires flexibility. If you stay flexible around this time, things should work out well. And also be true to yourself and to your spirit. If you feel blocked and you're unsure what step to take next, and it's like, whatever I try, I feel blocked. Well, then that's when you're going to want to stop, take some deep breaths, ask spirit for guidance, and listen to your soul, because it will provide the right guidance about the next step. And what you need to do is just put one foot in front of the other and trust that the next step will be revealed for you. Trust that you'll get to the final destination and you'll get to where you're supposed to be, because the Pisces is about having faith, or not necessarily being able to see everything. You just need to be able to see the next step and trust that spirit will guide you. That's how you will work through any frustration right around that time. So again, it's not exactly connected to the solar eclipse, but it could make for some frustration if you don't know how to deal with it. So mark this time on your calendars and make sure that you are following me on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, for daily posts and updates about this so I can keep you updated. And if you aren't on any of those platforms, I do post every third or fourth daily video to Patreon, so you can for that day get on Patreon and be able to view that video. And the last thing that I want to say is, the exact eclipse is on April 8th, but you're going to be able to see developments weeks before or weeks after. So we're more likely to see them close to the exact day of the eclipse, but it's what other days should we be mindful? Well, I would be mindful several days around the time I just saw Mercury will be retrograde, so around this eclipse. So any events or big developments, there could be some sort of delay there because of Mercury retrograde. You also want to take your time when making decisions around that time. And Mercury will retrograde back across that eclipse point, April 14th to the 15th. So you could have an insight or a message around that time. That time will be really important for you. Venus will cross 20 degrees, 20 degrees of Aries, April 20th and 21st. So that's when some friendly help may come in, or solutions for any issues. Venus tends to not produce big events, but she can smooth things over. And after Mercury goes direct, May 5th and 6th, will cross back over that eclipse point again. So that could be another time where you could have understanding about a particular situation, good communication, research, information, meetings, things like that. And then I think the last day that we're going to want to look for as far as eclipse developments will be well into May, when Mars crosses the eclipse point around May 26th and 27th. Since that is occurring about 6 weeks after the eclipse, Mars can produce big events, and it can be very noticeable when Mars crosses an eclipse point. But it does occur about 6 weeks after the original solar eclipse, so that won't be as bad. But it could be a day where you'll want to take some action. Something will be brought to your attention, needing courage. It could produce a little bit of stress. But again, since it occurs well after the eclipse, I don't think that will be quite as troublesome as it could. And it will be right there with Chiron, so some healing available there too. So lots of stuff to keep in mind for this eclipse season. Make sure to note where these eclipses fall in your natal astrology chart. That will clue you into the area of life that it will affect for you. And of course, I will keep you updated as we go along.